What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and this is my ranking of my favorite, according to me, ranking of A Tribe Called Quest, ATCQ, studio albums. They had 6 of them, 5 of them in the 90s, one a decades, 21st century later, sort of comeback album that was just absolutely surprisingly amazing. One of the most influential hip hop groups in the history of hip hop, without a doubt. One of the groups that was sort of one of those 90s groups that was sort of, I guess, a sort of reaction. You know, if every action has a reaction, it was sort of the reaction to gangster rap, what was coming out of the 80s and 90s, and, you know, kind of pushing that and pushing hip hop into a new direction. Tribe was very much about like being positive, you know, affirmations, you know, empowerment, you know, was very focused and not in a way that's condemning what other people were doing, but just like taking a different path and pretty much saying like the title to their second album, Low End Theory. That title had 2 explanations, according to, I think I've seen interviews with Q-Tip, and he said that title came from the fact that, you know, the bass, the low end, but also like, you know, in American culture, in American society, the black male was essentially on the low end of the totem pole. And this was in a chance to like, you know, affirm like the identity of the black male and empower them and speak out for them and, you know, be positive and present a positive image forward, since most people in American society are more than willing to just like look at gangster rap and say, that's what all black males are doing or whatever. But anyways, fantastic band. 6 albums, none of them are bad. Connection to Frank Zappa. They sample Lou Reed, and Lou Reed was in a group called the Velvet Underground, which is shitty a group as the Frank Zappa's Mothers. So we have a connection right there. I'm sure there's more, especially considering the stuff they sampled, but we'll just go with that for now. So anyways, 6 albums. I'm gonna talk through them, and then I'll put the list on the screen when I'm done, and then you tell me your favorite and all that kind of stuff. So here we go, on to number 6. My number 6 is their number 5th, The Love Movement, which came out in 1998. 4 members in this group: Q-Tip, Phife Dawg, Jarobi White, and Ali Shaheed Mohammed. 2 of them apparently were not getting along by this point, Phife Dawg and Q-Tip. Apparently there were interpersonal issues. And apparently that affected the recording of this album. And you can kind of feel that in a number of the tracks that feature just them. There are a lot of guest artists on this album, which for me is normally not something I need or even want in like hip hop. If I buy your album, I want to hear you more than I want to hear guest artists. Even though, you know, sometimes the guest artists are stealing the show. But this is one of those where when it is just them, there does seem to feel like there's just a lack of maybe the same level of enthusiasm isn't there. I think the rhymes are still good. The beats are still pretty much the same. I think the template for a Tribe beat is like straightforward and as simple as possible. It's like every beat is like a chicken dish, but some beats are like a chicken with like spicy ingredients. Some have a more like, you know, barbecue. Some might be like a chicken cacciatore. They're doing different things with a basic ingredient. But for the most part, I think one of the beauties of Tribe is the beats are relatively straightforward. I don't want to say simple, but like they're not trying to do more than they need to do. And then we just get MCs just dropping amazing rhymes. And I think the problem with this is something about the beats, the production on this. There's a thinness, like this brash harshness to the snare beat, essentially, that it's not too dissimilar from their other previous albums, but something about it just doesn't feel right in my ear. At least in the beginning. After a while, it seems like it warms up. But there's that, and it does seem when it's just them, there is a lack of something like that spark seems to be lacking. Like they're still great. They're still doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, they're not dropping the ball on that, but that extra oomph seems to be not there. For me, this is the one album in which the guest artists every time there's a guest artist, it's like, okay, these people are really happy to be on a Tribe album and they're bringing it 100%. Busta Rhymes, when he shows up on it, stepping it up, like he is stepping it up. Busta Rhymes comes in like the proverbial lion and just absolutely like just takes control of it. And I think he's the first guest artist that appear, and it's almost like it's almost like it was recorded in the order the songs are, and they all saw the way Busta came in, and everybody else came in like, yeah, I'm coming in with that kind of fire because Busta set the bar on here. There's a number of really good songs on here. Busta is great. Busta's Lament is great. The closing track, Rock Y'all, is a fantastic track. All the songs are kind of, deal with the concept of love. Not a bad album by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to the ones that preceded it and compared to the one that would come, decade and a half later, it really just does seem like the least inspired of their efforts, though not a bad effort. I wouldn't say it's the best place to start if you're not a Tribe fan already. Like I think this should be the last one you get to, because I do think has a less, it's one of those you appreciate and you respect what they do, but you're not necessarily going to go out and like fight a revolution because of it, because revolutions need to be fought sometimes. But yeah, that's my number 6, The Love Movement. My number 5 is their 4th album, Beats, Rhymes, and Life. This came out in 1996. And this is without a doubt, their like darkest, their like maybe least positive album. The opening track, Phony Rappers, is coming at phony rappers, which seems so like antagonistic to everything else that the Tribe is about at this point. Up to this point, it's still got some great rhymes and some great lines, and the beats are good and all that stuff. But it's an interesting shift in sort of lyrical approach. The song Crew ends with what I'm pretty sure is a gunshot, which kind of is just jarring in the context of a Tribe album. So it's little things like that are a little just like, it's a slightly different approach. The beats, for the most part, in the beginning are very, I think the beats on this are a really good example of like the serving chicken approach, where like I think it's like the first 4 or 5 songs almost feel like it's the exact same, just kind of the same tempo, same beat, but like one of them will have like a really cool bass line. One of them have some like 70s keyboard action. One of them might have like some jazzy sax. One of them has a really cool guitar. What is it? Jam has a really nice jazzy guitar that runs through it. So in a sense, it almost feels like it's a slight step down from the previous albums. And there's a little more of like, we've got this, we know what we're doing, let's put it into just like neutral and coast. I do think the album gets much better as it moves on. The songs just seem like they have a little more happening to them. They get a little more energetic. Like it just seems like things get a little more, I don't want to say chaotic, but a little more like inspired and like important and like urgent. Yeah, it's a solid album. It's just yeah, I don't know. The song Baby Fife's Return, awesome, high energy back in the back half of this. But this is one where I do think the beats kind of run together, and this is one of those where I think the more you sit down and listen to this album and just like are focused in on what's being said, and like this is one of those where I like reading the lyrics as I listen to this. I think I get a lot more out of it because I think the beats and even the flow that they're bringing tends to have an homogeny, tends to get homogenous after a while. But when you actually pay attention to the details, you pick out the little nuances and stuff like that. But it's definitely more of a slow burner, as they like to say. The people I hang out with like to say. It's one of those albums that doesn't grab you immediately, but the more you listen to it, the more you appreciate it. But I think the one thing that is a marked difference is it does just seem a little darker, a little more like jaded, maybe even. Like we've been in the business now for 3 albums. Maybe we've been burned by people. Maybe people are coming at us. There's just something about this for an album titled Beats, Rhymes, and Life. It seems like the beats are not as inspired. The rhymes are. The rhymes are still bringing it. And the life is just a different attitude towards life. Like maybe life is wearing down on them a little bit. But it's a great listen. Like I still enjoy this album. I put it on and have a great time. but I do think it's a slight step down. You have the number 6, kind of a step down. This is a step down, and the next 4 left on this list are like S tier, like almost perfect. This is maybe A plus, maybe an S minus on a good day, but maybe like more like an A plus. But yeah, that would be my number 5, their number 4, beats, rhymes, and life. My number 4 is their debut album, People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm. I think the title alone says everything you know about sort of Tribe's approach to music. A very intentional title, a purposeful title, like it's there for a reason. I think it like sort of hints at their more, I don't know if intellectual is the word I want to use, but they're more like, we're here with a purpose. We're not just here to like drop beats and drop rhymes. Like we have a bigger goal in mind. And I think that title sort of like gives that away. I also think the opening track, Push It Along, is kind of a template for everything they would do. You have like the first 2/3 of it, maybe a little less than that, is pretty relatively straightforward beats, and like Q-Tip and Phife are just kind of exchanging bars. Q-Tip comes across as maybe the elder statesman, a little more refined, a little more focused, a little more like developed in what he's bringing to the table. Phife is maybe a little more energetic. There's a more younger energy, I think, to Phife than Q-Tip. And then about 2/3 of the way through, we kind of go into this like almost trippy psychedelic hip hop type coda in which Jarobi comes forward, and he's almost like a hype man in a weird sense, but it's not your typical bombastic hype man. It's a more low key, trippier psych hype man. And I think this 7.5 minute opening kind of tracks everything that Tribe's going to bring over the next like 5 albums. Fantastic opening. This also has I Left My Wallet in El Segundo on it, which when this came out, kind of blew my mind. When I was in high school, I was in the cross country team, and we used to have a meet in El Segundo every year. And the first time we went, I was super excited because like El Segundo is a coastal town. It's on the beach. I thought maybe I wasn't excited to be running on the beach because that's a pain, but I thought we'd have like great coastal views. It would be fantastic. No. We ran the streets of El Segundo, which are like, it's like there's this little like hill range that's right on the coast of that part of Southern California. And so we ran all these really stupidly steep streets, which running up a hill sucks. Running down a hill is even worse because it just absolutely kills your shins. But we used to say after the meet, it was always like the 3rd or 4th meet of the season, that like we'd get back to school on Monday, we'd have to like run, and we'd always say like, we can't, man. I left it all in El Segundo, man. I'm exhausted. I burned my shoes out. I don't know if we actually said I left it in El Segundo, but we would always complain that El Segundo killed us. So when this song dropped like 10 years later, I was like, dude, this is brilliant. But that's a fantastic song. Bonita Applebom's a fantastic song. Almost has like a post 70s like soft rock hip hop in a weird way. My only complaint about this album is there's 2 samples on here that to this day I just don't like. They sample Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke, but they only do that first phrase of the horns, that da-na-na-na, and then they repeat that. And like without the resolution of the rest of that opening, it feels like, doesn't feel like complete. And then they also sample Lou Reed's Take a Walk on the Wild Side. That's the Zappa connection. And that song, I don't know, I don't want that to be sampled. That to me, it was in an American Express commercial. So it's like, I think the American Express commercial might have even been prior to this. So the American Express commercial, whenever it came, ruined that sample for me. But it does have a great sample of a Nappy Dugout from Funkadelic in Ham and Eggs, which is just a really silly song about food. But this is a good album. It's definitely not as serious and like, I don't know, as like philosophically, this is our worldview as their next 2 would be. It's got some moments like Ham and Eggs, but it's a really fun album. It's a great album. It's an S tier album. And I had it in number 3 for a while, but I really want to make a statement with my number 3. So I bumped this back to number 4, simply so I could prove a point about number 3, which I'm going to get to now. But number 4 is People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm. My number 3 is their 6th and final album. We Got It From Here, ... Thank you for your service. This came out in 2016. They started recording this. Fife got sick. I think Fife actually passed away prior to the release of this, right? This came out in November of 2016. Yeah, Fife passed away in March. So it's got the last of his, last thing he ever did. And I put this in number 3. I had it in number 4, but I decided to put it up for number 3, even though I think this may be on the same par as their debut, because this is a ridiculous, fantastic album. For a comeback, 16, 17 years, 16, 17, 18 years after their last album, this thing is amazing. And the list of guest artists on here, like this is one of those instances where it's like, all right, they got a lot of guest artists, but I'm okay with it because it's almost like, whoa, we have a chance to be on a Tribe album. Like these people influenced us. Like you have Busta comes back. You got Andre 3000 is on here. Talib Kweli's on here. Kanye West is on here. Anderson Paak is on here. Kendrick Lamar is on here. Like this thing is just, it is fantastic. And I can only imagine that all these people were just like thrilled to be on a Tribe album. And this is really by far their most dynamic. I think some of the production decisions on here are like the craziest production decisions they have. There's a lot more going on in a lot of these songs than like on your normal Tribe song, but it all works. And it's almost like Jack White is on here. It's almost like, I think like, it's like one of those where it doesn't really sound like anybody that's come since they last made their album, but at the same time, it's like, it shows that they've been listening to everybody that's been around for the past 2 decades. And they're like gonna not overtly acknowledge the influence, but acknowledge the fact that, you know, they're here by what they play. Really good stuff. But it has one of my favorite samples of all time is they sample Elton John's Benny and the Jets. The line that, I don't know the whole words, but it leads up to solid wall of sound. And then they loop the solid wall of sound, which is the song Solid Wall of Sound. And that becomes the beat, solid wall of sound, solid wall. And they build this awesome song around that. But the politics are on point. The flow on here is absolutely incredible. The beats are amazing. It's kind of all over the place musically. Like the first 5 or 6 tracks each take you at a completely different place. Does get a little indulgent in the back, but it also I think Damo Suzuki is on this album too. But it also starts to get, I think there's a tribute to Fife towards the end. So the indulgence is understandable because, you know, they lost Fife Dog, you know, during the recording and making of this. My only complaint about this album is they, at the end of the very first song, The Space Program, there is an awesome Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory quote that when Willy Wonka is on the boat and he's doing that thing and the rowers keep on rowing and they never know they're growing and they're showing. And then they get to the end of that and one of the kids goes, and then Willy goes, we're here. One of the kids goes, we're where? Up there, where's there, or something. There's this really cute exchange. It is a great use of the Willy Wonka, but then they close it out with an oompa loompa oopity doo. Takes me out of the moment. That's the one thing I wish was gone from here. I don't think the oompa loompa thing works. It's the one thing on this album that I'm like, ugh. Other than that, this is a surprisingly amazing album. The energy, the inspiration, the fun, the beats, the flows, the concepts, the guest appearances, the samples other than the Oompa Loompa thing. Like if you have not heard this album, find it, listen to it, enjoy it. It is an absolute beast. My number 3, We Got It From Here. Thank you for your service. My second favorite album, or shall we say my 1B favorite album, is their third, Midnight Marauders, which came out in 1993. I would say this and the one that's number 1 on this list are pretty much on par as perfect hip-hop albums. I had to find a reason. I didn't want to tie them, so I'm putting this in number 2 because this has a that I enjoy, a recurring sort of female voice that sort of introduces the band at one point, introduces the album at one point, tells you exactly the average number of BPMs that this entire album is going to be, which I think is 98, 96, right? It's not quite 100, or maybe it was 100. If I just listened to that on the way to work today. Um, it's got some little facts to remind you of the fact that, black men are dying from AIDS at an alarming rate, and the government's not doing anything about it. Introduce the members of the band. But I'd rather have, it only takes up a total of maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But if I could take that out and have an extra song or an extra track, that's why this is at 2 and the one at number 1 is number 1. It's fantastic. Just a great album. So many incredible songs on here. It's straightforward beats. It's pretty simple. Elements of jazz throughout. Relatively laid back. One of my favorite songs I can't say the name of, but it's Sucka Something. The opening real track, Stephen Biko, is absolutely fantastic. Steve Biko. Yeah, like this is tribe hip hop at its purest, at its best, at its most direct, with a little bit of sort of like, hip hop skit action in this female voice. It's like, welcome to Midnight Marauders. I'm your tour guide. But yeah, every song is great. Every flow is great. Every beat is great. The sequencing is perfect. Yeah, I really don't even know what else to say about this album because it's just really just an absolutely like perfect hip hop album. But yeah, it's my number 2, but it's as good as number 1. I think this is one of those where like number 2 or number 1 are interchangeable and whatever. But yeah, this is an absolutely fantastic album that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people who aren't into hip hop and they just casually dismiss it just because, I don't know, there's lack of melody or whatever they say. But I don't know, man. I don't know how you can this is just, everything about this is exactly, it's so perfect and unpretentious, I guess would be the word. It's like hip hop in its purest form, right? Like simple, straightforward beats, people just dropping bars after bars, positivity, some great lyrics, great flow, rhymes all over the place. It's a great listen. It's technically my number 2, but it's like 1B. 1B, Midnight Marauders, their third album, which means number 1 has to be this. My number 1 is their second, The Low End Theory. Second album, sophomore album. They drop a perfect 10, S tier, absolutely awesome hip hop album. This is the one where they sort of cement that sort of the jazz reputation that they have for like incorporating jazz into it, and that you have a lot of like jazz samples. Art Blakey, Cannonball Adderley, Weather Report, if you consider that jazz, some Minnie Riperton, some Doors, Light My Fire. But it's none of the case in which you're like, oh, that's this song, and they're just like flowing over it. It's like the more you listen to this album, the more like, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. They're sampling so-and-so on here. Like, they do a really good job of like, their production on this takes these samples and weaves them so nicely into the track that it just like, it just becomes this whole other thing instead of just like I think a lot of complaint that I hear from people I know who don't like rap or hip hop for whatever reason, it's that they take other people's music and just like lay beats or, lay a flow over it or do something. This is taking other people's music, as all artists do, right? They all take inspiration from other people and do stuff and really make it into their own like Tribe Called Quest type fabric that's just unique to this band. But everything about this album from start to finish, it's just perfect. The flow, the rhymes, the songs, the beats, the guest artists, everything about this is just, it's a perfect hip hop album. Like this and the one that was number 2, Midnight Marauders. Like if you want to know like the influence of like so many artists that like Kendrick Lamar, like, I mean, especially like To Pimp a Butterfly, like maybe that doesn't happen if Tribe doesn't come along, right? There's so many albums where like you can hear from later hip hop artists, like you know that they grew up on this stuff, and this is part of like their MC DNA. And this is truly just one of those absolutely perfect special albums. My number one, though, again, 1A, 1B with Midnight Marauders, because they're both near perfect albums. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. And Busta Rhymes is on this one too. Let me tell you something. Busta Rhymes just kills it anytime he shows up on a Tribe album. Kills it. But yeah, my number one, their second, The Low End Theory. And that is what they look like in typewritten form. All good albums. None of those are bad. I would say Love Movement, maybe A minus, Beats, A plus, S minus. Everything else is pure on S tier, pure on perfection. And I want to say again that comeback album in the mid, like from like what 8 years ago, is so ridiculously inspired and fantastic and fun. It's a fun listen. In fact, I almost think if you're not a hip hop fan and like you're looking for an entryway to get into more hip hop, that album, the We Got It From Here, their use of samples, the sort of dynamic, the way almost the first, especially the first like 5 or 6 tracks are going in completely different directions, different ideas, different energies, a lot of really cool changes. Like, I think that's a great entry to an entire new musical genre, let alone just a great entry into Tribe. But yeah, man, really good band, really fantastic group. So yeah, let me know what you think of this band, your thoughts on where you would rank these albums. Interested in the Midnight vs. Low. Like, there might be people that pick Travels, maybe even people who pick We Got It. I'd be surprised if anybody's favorite was Beats or Love, but maybe it is, and that's cool. No judgment here. But I am interested, if you are a fan and you're watching this, and it is between Low End or Midnight, I'd like to know which is your favorite, and maybe why. Did you come to one first? Is that why? Yeah, so that's it. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all those things, and go listen to A Tribe Called Quest, man. It's really good, positive hip hop, man. It's absolutely amazing stuff. That's all I got. Peace. Talk to you later.